You're live, Jesus.
We are live, Jesus, and I suggest you start the session at about 2 minutes past, as we are still letting people in.
Great. Let's wait until 12:02 then.
So I'm just going to start recording and see that just in case the backup. And I will mute myself now, but I'll still be able to hear you.
So should be starting like in 30 seconds, compas. I'm going to start now. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesus Rodriguez. I'm the founder and editor of Orinoco Tribune, an anti-imperialist website based in Venezuela. And today we have the pleasure of holding this webinar that we found necessary under the events that occurred in Venezuela after the July 28 presidential elections. We called this webinar Defending Bolivarian Venezuela Against Yet Another US-led coup attempt. This webinar has been co-organized by Orinoco Tribune and the International Manifesto group. And we have the pleasure of having very important, very good panelists that also were observers in the July 28 presidential elections in Venezuela. We have Francisco Dominguez, we have Diego Sequeira, we have Linda Christian, Ivan Pankratz, Arnold Agos, Alison Bodin, and we also plan to have Dimitri Laskaris with us, and he wanted to participate today, but under the current events that are happening in the in Palestine today, he let us know that it was going to be complicated for him to join us. So I'm going to read you the brief description that we prepared when we were organizing when we decided to organize a webinar. So this is it. The presidential election in Venezuela held on July 28 concluded with the re-election of President Nicolás Maduro for the next presidential term, 2025-2031, who won with about 51.9% of the votes, according to the second bulletin of the National Electoral Council, the CNE. Although he received a little over 7% more votes than his nearest rival, Edmundo González Urrutia, of the far-right coalition Unitary Platform, the ultra-right opposition has refused to recognize the results, claiming that President Maduro and the ruling United Socialist Party of Venezuela, PSUV, carried out electoral fraud. Just after the initial declaration of the results in the early morning hours of July 29 and the far-right's non-recognition of the same, violent protests erupted in several parts of Venezuela, causing widespread material and human losses, including loss of lives, reminiscent of the guarimbas of 2014 and 2017. and the violence accompanying the Guaidó coup attempt in 2019. In parallel, the data transmission system of the CNE suffered an unprecedented cyber attack that delayed the transmission of results as reported by the CNE while announcing its first bulletin. Taking advantage of this situation, far-right politician María Corina Machado published falsified voting records as evidence, between quotations, of electoral fraud and launched a media campaign presenting González Urrutia as the winner of the July 28 election. This has been repeated and inflated by mainstream media outlets across the world, as well as on social media. As expected, the United States declared González as the president of Venezuela, and some of its vassals in Latin America and Europe have followed suit. However, the U.S. government backtracked a few days later, announcing that it was monitoring the results of the elections very closely. Those things have changed in recent weeks, but we can talk about that later today. Was there really an electoral fraud in Venezuela? Is there a possibility of executing such a fraud and stealing an election in Venezuela? There were more than 900 international observers and 1,300 foreign journalists accredited by the CNE to witness the electoral process. What do they have to say about the election and the fraud claims? To hear directly from some of such observers and journalists, International Manifesto Group and Orinoco Tribune are jointly organizing this webinar where we will be joined by a number of experts who were present in Venezuela during the electoral process. So let me explain to you how we are planning to have this webinar. It's going to be a bit different. In this webinar, I'm going to raise questions, and then we're going to pass ask each panelist to answer those questions in a 2 minutes time frame. So that's basically the dynamic of the webinar. After that, session of questions that I'm going to raise to the panelists, we're going to have also a question and answer session that is the questions are going to be picked from the chat in Zoom. So I believe that it's important for you, those of you that have questions, to write them down in the chat on Zoom. Also, another important thing is that we respect the right to the participants, to the watchers of the Zoom, to dissent with the things that the speakers or the organizers are saying about the elections, their opinions. But we won't allow interruptions to the broadcast, to the webinar, and we're gonna have a call if someone is trying to disrupt the webinar. And after that first call, that person might be expelled from the webinar if they keep disrupting it. And let me read you the speakers' bios. We have Diego Sequeira as one of our panelists. He's a journalist, writer, translator, editor, and political analyst based in Caracas, Venezuela. He is a founding member of Misión Verdad, where he writes about geopolitics, global conflicts, and Latin American and Venezuelan history and politics. Francisco Dominguez is an specialist on Latin American contemporary political economy, about which he has published extensively. A former refugee from Chile's Pinochet, he's also National Secretary of the Venezuelan Solidarity Campaign in the UK. He's also involved in solidarity activities with Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico. He makes regular contributions to various alternative media. He is co-author of Right-Wing Politics in the New Latin America and author of the pamphlet Maduro, A Decade Continuing Chavez's Socialist Anti-Imperialist Struggle. Arnaud Lagos is a Montreal-based author and journalist specializing in geopolitics and international relations, Global South, multipolarity, Latin America, ALBA, TCP, Venezuela, and Cuba. He has visited Venezuela 5 times, including the July 28 presidential elections as an international observer, and reading over 40 articles on Venezuela, many of them also published in Spanish and French. of his 2013 book, published in English and Spanish, on comparative political system, the section on Venezuela is still very valid. His website is arnoldagos.com. Ivan Pancras, he is a Venezuela solidarity activist based in Winnipeg, Canada. In 2007, he went to West Africa, where he led workshops with local teachers, and he is a math and physician education teacher. We have Linda Christian, that works with the International Manifesto group as an administrator. She completed a PhD in history, specializing in the history of the French Revolution during the Terror and Thermidor periods. Alison Bodin is a social justice and anti-war organizer and author based in Vancouver, Canada. She is on the editorial board of the Fire This Time newspaper and coordinator of the Fire This Time Venezuelan Solidarity Campaign, as well as a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. She is author of the book Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela, Battle of Ideas Press. She regularly publishes articles on climate justice, migrant and refugees issues, and Venezuela. Her articles have been published extensively, and she has traveled as a speaker and participant to international anti-war and anti-imperialist events in Cuba, Venezuela, Ireland, England, and the U.S. There's my bio. My name is Jesus Rodriguez again, and I'm an expert in international relations in Venezuelan politics and media and communication. I served for several years as Consul General of Venezuela in Chicago until 2017. And before that, I was part of the foundational editorial team of the Venezuelan online media Porrea. And I'm also the founder and editor of the Orinoco Tribune. So welcome all to the webinar. I'm gonna jump immediately to the questions, but before that, I wanted to raise that there are two webinars, important webinars that are happening soon. One of them is organized by the United National Anti-War Coalition and the U.S. Peace Council, and it's gonna have Ayamu Baraka, Vijay Prasad, Bahman Assad, Roger Harris, and So Alexander. That webinar is planned to happen this Thursday, August 29 at 7 p.m. And also there is another webinar that is planned for, I believe that's the one. Sorry, I was confused. So let's jump to the question compass. The first question to all the panelists is, how was your experience observing the presidential elections before, during, and during the election day? And I want to know if you noticed something wrong on election day, and how was your experience in the day after the election? If you fear for your lives due to the far-right violence, if you notice something wrong in the behavior of opposition members and supporters. So I'm gonna ask Francisco to be the first to answer the question. Remember that each one of you have 2 minutes to answer the question. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you very much for the invitation. This is another important webinar organized by the International Manifesto Group and Orinoco Tribune. We are going to need more of this because things keep evolving and changing. I think they're improving. I arrived there on the 23rd, and there was total calm, normality all the way to the 28th. One of the things I do when I observe elections is I look at the political publicity, in lampposts, walls, and so on. And I always notice that in Venezuela, people respect that. There's no vandalization of any of them, either from the government side or the opposition side. On the day we went to visit at least 5 vote polling centers, and it was a huge number of people there waiting to vote. Everything was normal, it was okay. And the only thing difference that I noticed, which is with the benefit of hindsight, is this. I monitor Venezuela literally daily. And I noticed that for about a few months, possibly 6 months in advance, before the election, the world corporate media was making statements, sending a message that it was certain that Maduro was going to lose, and the opposition was scoring in the region of 70 to 80%, and that the election was rigged anyway. And what was surprising about that was the homogeneity of the message. Literally all the media were putting forward exactly the same moment, the same message. On the day after, suddenly I remember at about midday, our hotel was surrounded by about 400 people with bad intentions. You could tell that they really were up to no good.
2 minutes.
Just 10 seconds more. And what they did, they attacked a couple of National Guard men who were there. They brutalized one of them really badly. They took one of their motorbikes and set it on fire. So in that sense, I don't think they knew we were inside. I think had they known that we're inside, we would have been telling a different story. You're muted.
Yes, I was close to that event and I remember it very clearly. Diego Sequeira, I'm not sure if he was able to join us. I'm not sure if he's with us, but if he is not with us, we will have to ask Linda to answer the question. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, I'm going to yell because there's something wrong with my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a first-time visitor to Venezuela, so this was a brand new experience for me. And I did have the general impression that we were sponsored by the Electoral Commission, CME, and the Bolivarian Institute. And I had the distinct impression that they were afraid that something was going to happen to us throughout my stay there. I was there for about a week. I didn't at any time feel that my life was in danger or that I was in danger, but I could sense the sort of tension from those who were responsible for us. I had heard about the attacks or potential attacks on the electrical grid. I had heard about the numerous assassination attempts of Maduro over the last year. I think there were 7 of them, he said, in the last 2023. And then as we were doing our events, I mean, one of the events was on the day of the election with the results. We went to Miraflores and we could see the windows where they had attacked him with drones in 2018. So that was kind of my general impression, was that there was a sort of threat of violence, although I didn't feel afraid at all. A few days before the election, we came back from an event, and there was an emergency vehicle in the driveway of the hotel, and really ramped up security within the hotel. And I suspect that was Francisco was talking about.
There's an echo in your mic. Let's go to Ivan now. Welcome, Ivan.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
A very quick thank you to Carol Mowat. She was originally invited to be an observer and couldn't make it, and passed my name on, so I got that opportunity, and that was an amazing opportunity. Thank you, Carol. What struck me before the election was how very welcome I felt. We had sessions in the districtal capital around the Boulevard Theater, and I was warned before going to Venezuela, be careful, don't walk. And I once there, I think instinctively, it just felt very safe. And I walked around a lot with people, by myself, through markets, through that entire area, made to feel very welcome. And I'm an obvious foreigner. I don't speak Spanish fluently. I have to use hand gestures. I have some Spanish, but people went out of their way to welcome me and thank me for being there. And I got a very similar feel on election day. Visited 5 polling stations and felt very welcome everywhere. Met some very elderly members of the Bolivarian militia at a polling station. I think that's kind of a fascinating idea. I think it's a great example of grassroots participatory democracy, getting citizens involved. And, you know, there were manageable lines at the polling stations I was at, varying from some line to really no lines. People could just walk in and vote. And so I have to question, why are pictures of lines at voting stations, at polling stations, why is that used as some kind of slur against the whole process? I don't understand, but this is my experience. It seemed to run smoothly. Then the evening, that evening from the Euro Building Hotel, the observers went up on the roof and we could see some chaos fairly close to the hotel. We could see a gathering of angry opposition supporters, and
2 minutes.
We could see police shooting tear gas in their direction. And that was the first that I felt any anxiety or danger. Up till then, I was made to feel very welcome.
Great, Ivan. Arnold, welcome. Thank you very much, and congratulations to IMG and Orinoco Tribune for organizing this third webinar, and specifically to Jesus for that daring attempt, I hope it's working out, to change the normal format in order to, to try to increase the spontaneity and the interest on the subject. I arrived there on July 23rd. And I immediately broke away from the, normal procedures, and I went to speak to people on the street, using the fact that I'm able, fluent in Spanish, and I was a bit, taken aback by the number of people who answered questions when I asked them, "What do you think of the elections? What do you think of Maduro or the opposition candidate?" Many of them said, "Well, main thing for me is that we have free and fair elections, etc." So there was this, this concept of, coming from imperialism about free and fair elections without saying anything more. However, I got the following feeling from those very short discussions with around 10 or 15 people, that Maduro definitely will win for sure. At the same time, it won't be in the Venezuelan terms a landslide like 60% or 62%, but would be pretty close, around 50, 51%. The other thing, with regards to what happened after the election, in my view, the single most important event after the elections was the July 29th late evening broadcast by Nicolás Maduro to the entire population of Venezuela, detailing the very violent actions that took place the evening of the 29th. And this is an evening of the 28th, as well as an evening on 29th, with videos portraying exactly what they were
2 minutes.
what they were up to. That is, violent killing of Chavista supporters, attacking clinics, attacking hospitals, destroying statues to Hugo Chavez and to well-known indigenous leaders in the country. So what I take away from that is that my view on the elections, I don't think we could, on democracy, we have to look at the participatory nature of it when people actually vote. That's obvious. But I think in the case of Venezuela, it is a very good example of an ongoing protagonistic aspect of democracy that perhaps we do not speak enough about. And this was very clear when he appeared on television and actually interacting in a way with the Venezuelan people, so they are conscious of what's happening. That is a definite attempt of another coup d'etat. And in the context of the protagonistic democracy, one other example, only 2 or 3 days after that, there was a massive demonstration in Caracas and other cities of Venezuela in support of Maduro. It had nothing to do with dropping a ballot box, but everything to do with protagonistic democracy. Thank you, Arnold. Thank you. Ali Samburin. Welcome.
Hello, greetings to everyone. Thank you also to the IMG and Orinoco Tribune for organizing this report back. I am excited to let everyone know that I'm actually here in Venezuela once again. I'm here as an elections observer for a different kind of election. It is a community consultation vote where communal councils all across Venezuela are voting on projects that they want to see prioritized and funded by the federal government or the main Venezuelan government that will then be carried out by administrated here in the communes. I'm here at a commune, Los Cocolitos, and here there are two projects that have already been implemented since the first consultative vote in April, one of which was a Barrio El Dentro, a Cuban doctor's health center here in the community, and another a transportation truck. This to say, first, that I will not likely be able to stay the entire webinar, but I'll come in when I can. And second, to say that Venezuela's participatory democracy and part of their response to the violence that some of us observed following the election was to continue with their democratic process and continue with this vote today. So you can see people in the line behind me, very similar to the lines during the presidential election. You might maybe hear some music, there's a sense of celebration. And I will say that on the night of the election, I was at Miraflores Palace with Venezuelans and international observers until about 2 o'clock in the morning. And there was no sense of violence at that point. It wasn't until the US government, in collusion with Maria Corina Machado, gave the signal, hey, we're not recognizing these results, which many of us knew would happen because the opposition in the form of Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado, the far-right opposition, said they wouldn't recognize the results. They refused to sign an agreement to say they would recognize them. When that signal was sent, that's when we saw the violence spur up across different parts of Venezuela. But I'll say that today, being here 25 days later from when I last was, it is very clear that the Bolivarian Revolutionary Forces and President Maduro have cemented their victory and continued to carry forward with mass mobilizations in support of the government, and have continued to carry forward really establishing their sovereignty and self-determination. So I'm in Venezuela again on a day of celebration where there's no sign of violence or civil war as the US has attempted to foment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Now we're going to jump to the next questions. But before that, I just wanted to mention that when I asked about if you notice something wrong about the behavior of the opposition people, I was thinking in something that I noticed. Maybe I noticed it because I'm here, I'm Venezuelan, but it's related to the like a psychological reaction that many people that are opposition supporters show when the results of the elections were announced, and that is terrible. And I believe that ignited somehow some of the legitimate protests that happened on Monday, the 29th. But I have to highlight that, as many of the speakers already said, that most of those so-called protests were actually violent incidents. Most of them paid, full of gang members that were paid to create violence. I'm not saying that all the incidents and all the protests were violent. Some of them were not, and nothing happened to many of those protesters that went to the street peacefully. But in the events, in the incidents where violence erupted, I'm pretty sure that there was the presence of criminal gangs in those violent protests. I witnessed it myself on Monday, the 29th, when I had to travel around Caracas to several places, and I saw with my own eyes some of these violent incidents and some of the peaceful ones also. So let's jump to the second question, and it is, what is your opinion about the opposition fraud claim and the so-called voting records that they present to support this fraud claim? Francisco.
Yeah, I'm going to be telegraphic because of the 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
The first point I want to make is this: the opposition has claimed fraud, I don't know how many times, possibly 20, maybe less, but certainly every time they lose, they claim fraud. And although they've been doing this for decades, never ever once they have actually lodged a formal complaint with any evidence whatsoever saying, because of X, because of what happened in this district, because of what happened in this mayorship, because of what happened in this polling center, because of the irregularity, because of discrepancy and so on, we are making a complaint. They never ever have done that. Or every time they lose, they go to the media and claim fraud without any evidence whatsoever. This is exactly the same this time. If they, as they claim, they had 100% of the actors of the tally sheets, I have to be careful how I pronounce that word myself. If they claim to have 100% of them, why are they not in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in El País, in the BBC? Where are they? And all they have produced is a phony, fake website where when you do the investigation, actually, they presented 949,472 actors out of a total of 30,000 plus. So it is impossible, number one, to claim victory on these very flimsy grounds, especially because they have not lodged any formal complaint saying that we won. So now what you have is the international media, the United States, even Blinken, and poor Millet and others backtracking and clutching straws to try to sustain
2
the
minutes.
position. Even The Guardian today said, well, the opposition being very clever because they actually showed that they have 83% of the actors, and therefore that proved that they won, which is a complete fake. And after the Supreme Court investigation, I think this is going to start fizzling out completely. And I'm confident that, with our work and solidarity, we can actually ensure that this is stamped out.
Thank you, Francisco. Linda.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix it, but yeah. What is my opinion of the opposition's fraud claim and the voting records they present to support it? Well, anybody can make a facsimile of an official document and throw it up on the web and say this proves that they won. Right? This undermines the constituted authorities as much as other aspects of this whole media situation. I think it's a psyop, frankly. I think it's combined with the polls that are bogus, that the opposition was winning by 70%. I think Giuliano even said, oh, they've already won. This was before anybody had voted. The opposition had already won. And then they come up with these documents, and they're used online. They're also used by protest groups. The Canadian Venezuelans who are anti-government have got these photos of these documents. Well, this is a psyop. This is a perfect way to undermine the authority of the constituted agencies, the CNE itself. If anybody did that to Election Canada documents, there would be an uproar. It wouldn't be allowed. It wouldn't be taken seriously. But the propaganda, the psyop is, oh yeah, this is fraud. They were going to win. As Machado herself said, we've won. The whole world knows we've won the election. Right? It all fits into that, and it's just support that whole, if I can say, narrative, and undermines the CNE itself. It undermines the Maduro government and any kind of authorities that are
Thank you, Linda.
for the
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The same thing with this this whole issue of Maduro being a gangster and a dictator and authoritarian. This is all part of it. It's to, he's not. I can't see that he is. Every speech I heard, he said, the Venezuelan people are a people of laws. The Cifistas they hold their constitution sacred. He's got a little, like people used to have little Bibles that they kind of carried around. He's got a little constitution. I mean, this is not safe. He has to uphold the constitution. He knows he does. So this is just a way again to undermine
2 minutes.
his claim to constitutional adherence. And then finally, this whole thing when he submitted the results to the Supreme Court, it was the same argument. The Supreme Court, whatever they say, doesn't matter because they're close to the government. Well, like the courts aren't close to the government in the U.S. and Canada. They have independence, but it's not absolute. So that's, I think it's psyop, basically.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Ivan.
Thank you. The National Electoral Council does go to great lengths for to ensure transparency in the whole process, which begs the question, why would they go to such great lengths to ensure transparency if they were just going to obviously steal an election? Digital voting machines with a paper receipt, a public counting in the poll station, transparent. All parties can have a representative present to ensure that everything is going to add up at the end of the evening. International observers, if they're going to just blatantly steal an election, why go to all this trouble when other countries don't go to any of that trouble? They're going to great lengths to prove transparency. A few things about the claims from the opposition. And this is from mainstream media, what I've gathered. They seem to have a very inconsistent message. They are sending out the message that their observers were bullied out of the counting of polling stations, yet they still somehow got a very high percentage of the tally sheets. How would that be possible if there was this bullying and oppression in the polling stations? There are videos of the public counting, and we live in an era where there are cell phones everywhere. Where are the videos of these observers getting pushed out of the stations if it was happening to a great extent? The opposition doesn't seem shy about making accusations. They don't seem shy about rushing locked doors of a polling station and pushing security and fighting to get in. So if this was happening, there should be a lot of video evidence. And I guess the last thing I'll say is the corporate media is making a big deal about the QR codes from the tally sheets they've received. Anyone who's made a QR code knows that it takes seconds and you can link any website you want. This isn't some kind of irrefutable proof. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Arnold.
Well, in my view, there's a lot of statistics already been presented by our colleagues here, and we have them all over the website from the, Orinoco, Tribune, and others. I would like to mention the following fact, that with regards to fraud, the opposition in this particular election stated 4 months before the elections that the elections are going to be fraudulent. I would like to make the following point. For the opposition, they are not interested in elections. They are not interested in democracy. They are not interested in having the people's voice heard. For them, the elections is a pretext for regime change. And specifically, it's made to measure, right? Elections results come out. They may come out late because of technical issues. But this is their cue to go to the international media, to appeal to the United States and their allies, look, there is fraud, and immediately start the violent activities which, Jesus saw on the ground and others as well saw while we were there. And that is their only interest in elections. It is to create a conditions for regime change. Now, it's interesting to note, on 2 occasions when the opposition won the elections, that is on a referendum, and later on for the National Assembly, they didn't cry fraud, they accepted it, and they actually were able to assume the positions that they won. Now, the thing is, I did a study of voting, and in the current period, including those periods when the opposition won, the general amount, the average Chavista vote was around 5-6 million people. That were the same 5-6 million people or more that won on July 20 in July of this year. So the proof is in the pudding. There is a base of around 5-6 million Chavistas when they won the opposition and today. So no one could deny that this is a factor in the politics of Venezuela. And just to say, Venezuela organizes these elections because that's based on their constitution to give a choice to the people. And wouldn't we love to have that in the capitalist countries where you have a choice between an anti-imperialist and a pro-imperialist opposition? Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. Now that you mention the numbers of previous elections, I want to highlight, I also did some math trying to compare numbers, and one thing that called my attention is that in the regional elections of 2021, 3.6 million Chavista votes were casted. And according to the opposition flood claims, I mean, they claim that the Chavistas only casted 3.3 million votes in these elections, which doesn't make too much sense to me, especially because, I mean, we are talking about different kind of elections that usually have less voters than the presidential one. I'm talking about the regional elections in 2021. And from 2021 until today, the economic situation in Venezuela has improved importantly. So those numbers do not make too much sense to me. Sorry, Allison, if you are there. Maybe Allison is not available right now.
Can I just say one thing, Jesus?
Go ahead.
I was referring to the results on the national level. That is for president, National Assembly, and referendum. Because as you mentioned, on the local municipal, the situation is far different. Of course, the Chavista vote is much less, around 3 million, but nationally it's always in the 5 million, 6 million brackets.
Yes, you are absolutely right, and that's why it doesn't make sense. It makes less sense because usually in regional elections and parliamentary elections, the number of votes is less. So even comparing these presidential elections with the last ones, with the regional last elections in 2021, the opposition is claiming that they received more votes. I mean, that we Chavistas, voted less this time than in those elections. So let's jump to the next question, and I'm gonna do it in the contrary this time. Do you think, as the mainstream media is spreading, that President Maduro stole the elections? It's connected with the previous one, but let's hear you, Arnold, as Allison is not with us right now. Arnold, are you there?
Okay, sure. I'll go ahead. I'll make it short so people don't get tired of hearing the same voice twice.
No, don't worry.
Yeah, the elections were stolen. The theft took place in the following way. The opposition, encouraged by U.S. imperialism and their allies, changed the venue of the voting accountability, the counting of the votes from Caracas to Miami. Oh, a very minor thing. You know, I mean, what the hell does Miami have to do with the voting process in Venezuela? But, you know, you want to talk about a theft? That was the theft that took place. And also, yes, the theft took place on the late evening of July 28th, July 29th, and 30. Many of those violent demonstrators actually were looting local businesses, some of which were actually local businesses of the opposition, but they didn't care. That's where theft took place.
Thank you. Thank you, Arnold. Ivan. Are you there?
I am. My computer is slow to unmute here. I think any message from the corporate Western media should be viewed through the lens of history and through their past support for all kinds of Western intervention. The media will totally support a military coup if they think that it's in the West's best interests. They will totally support Western military intervention if they think it's in the West's best interest. And so any evidence of any claims of fraud has to be viewed with that lens. The one thing that having been there during the process, one thing that our media can't explain away is the widespread, very passionate support for Maduro. They ignore it. They don't want to address it in any way because that'd be very hard to explain. We, the observers, we attended the July 25th rally to close the campaign, and there was incredible numbers, energy, music, dancing. There were drone pictures of the street from a bird's eye view, and the numbers were countless. But the real numbers of that rally, of the party, extend well beyond the street. The observers walked from the Boulevard Theater. We walked about 2 kilometers to get to the rally. And the entire walk was a party. There were people in the street, PSUV t-shirts everywhere, Maduro support, people chanting. These are people that never even made it to the rally. And that's the extent of the support. So these are all people who believe they've benefited from the Bolivarian policies, and so they support Maduro, which is
2 minutes.
right. This would be the same demographic that rose up in great numbers to resist the Chavez coup, and unfortunately, these people are invisible in the Western media. Their concerns are invisible.
Thank you, Ivan. You're right. Linda.
Yeah, I agree with others that the extent to which Maduro has support is completely ignored. And like others, I was at the rally before the period of silence for the election, the last day of campaigning, and I have never experienced anything like that in my life. There were so many people. I think Alan McLeod, and I don't know how he came to this number, he said he thought there were 1 million people there. It was amazing. And I said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. No politician in Canada would get this kind of support. And, Caracas is a modernist kind of architecture, and in its overpasses and underpasses, every single road was a sea of people. Cheering, dancing, as others have said, dancing and singing. It's not such quantitative proof, but Maduro is loved. He has a huge amount of support, and there was no violence either amongst them. You have all that many people supporting Maduro.
I just feel the most amazing.
Go ahead.
Of course, everybody knows that it's a coalition, you know, all coming behind Maduro. So I don't think he stole the election. I know it's granted it's not qualitative. Again, I think this is all part of the attack that is being made on Venezuela. This is a form of warfare to attack the electoral system, to put out these fake polls, to claim there is fraud with these fake documents. This is an act of war. It really is. It's foreign interference in a domestic election, and people need to realize that. The cyber attacks, the threats of attacks to the election grid, the sabotage and fires set to election offices after the election. This is violence that was done by the opposition. And if they won the election legitimately, why do they have to do these things? Well, it's all part of the plan. And I note too that the violence is never attributed to the opposition. It's sort of in the mainstream media in the West, it's always attributed to these forces of discontent. No, it was the opposition. And the people who died in those attempts, I said 20 or 28, were National Guardsmen and civil militia people. It was the forces of the government that bore the brunt of the attack. So this all, I think it all shows that these claims that Maduro stole the election are in complete bad faith.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Well,
Francisco.
Yeah, there is a very peculiar situation here, because when a political party claims fraud, the onus is on them to demonstrate it. What has been going on ever since is that the international media have been put the onus on the CNE and the government of Venezuela, which is totally ridiculous. And so far, the opposition has been able to produce zilch. More interesting, it seems to me, is that, do you know how many countries have recognized Edmundo Gonzalez in the world? 0, none, not one. Not the United States, not Argentina, who backtrack, not anybody else. Whatever noises they make, it's totally clear that they know they cannot really go for this. And I've been counting the number of countries that actually been recognizing and celebrating the victory. So far, it's 57. I think many others, I don't know how many, are waiting for the Supreme Court results in order for these numbers going to increase quite dramatically. Who is actually leading this process? Is the United States. There is only one center of political power in the world that can command that level of obedience by the world corporate media. Nobody else can. And the reason why the United States is doing this is because it's determined to ensure that the Bolivarian Revolution doesn't succeed. And the reason is the United States is doing this as well as waging wars in many other places, because it's waging war against multipolarity. The main fear the United States has is the multipolar world. And Venezuela is in the vanguard of fighting for a new world, which is multipolar, where there is diversity and everybody actually can have benefit after relating in a cooperative manner with everybody else. And this is what the United States is doing. And if you were to look at the State Department, the National Endowment for Democracy, and you say its statements, you can actually literally see how these statements are being cut and pasted on the international media, because the phrases are exactly the same. And that is what is going on. So it seems to me that on this one, the Solidarity Movement has to play a very important role to ensure that people really know the details of what is at stake, and also the details of, the actual operation by the United States, which is a coup attempt.
2 minutes.
So I think that's what is going on, really. We have a very big job in our hands, but I think we're winning.
Thank you, Francisco. Just to add something to the discussion, I agree a lot with what you have been saying, especially about the Maduro's closing rally just a few days before the elections. I mean, that rally, and I shared that with several observers that I met during the elections, that rally is the best most crowded rally that, in my humble opinion, Maduro has held since 2013 when he was first elected president. And it resembles the best rallies led by President Chavez. So I believe that it's important to highlight that because it contradicts, the mainstream, the U.S. narrative about Chavismo not having any sort of support in Venezuela. And also, in the contrary, when you see the demonstrations from the opposition, what you see is not too many people. I'm not saying that they don't have people, they have. But in comparison with the mobilization of Chavismo, they are, centuries away, kilometers away from the support in the streets. So I just wanted to add that because I believe it's important, and that take us this line of questions take us to the other very important claim that is being made by many, even by some so-called leftists. And the question is the following: why do you think the Venezuelan National Electoral Council has not published the results? Let's begin with Francisco to keep the rhythm.
Well, I think it has. Not exactly in the way these people are asking, but the election system in Venezuela is such that it's impossible to substitute anybody to start with. But after the polling center closes, then the machine produces the result. That is the acta. And then this is corroborated by the ballot box. And then once that is the case, then
recording in progress.
The document is
We have some interruption.
just remove
Okay,
it.
I'll deal with that.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead, compa.
So once the result is there, it's corroborated with the ballot box. Every voter gets a receipt of what they voted for, and they know what they voted for because they confirm and they put that in the ballot box. Then at the end of the process, a document is produced digitally as well as physically that all those presents actually sign. If Machado and company claim to have 100% of the votes of the actors, then they should be identical to the ones that the CNE has. And the reason is all of them are identified by a QR code. And this has gone in. The investigation has taken place by the Supreme Court. They've gone through, they asked all the candidates to actually hand in, submit all the evidence they have regarding their own actors. And many of them, I think all of them, actually, of the candidates actually turned up, and they said that they had submitted some of the evidence. The parties that supported Mundo Gonzalez claim that they did not have any acta. So how can you say that you don't have any acta and at the same time claim that you won the election? And then worse, Edmundo Gonzalez did not turn up twice for this. If you have the actors, what you should do is turn up, show them, and then claim that you won the election. And this is what is really going on. I think, as far as I'm concerned, the electoral system of Venezuela is the best in the world. I've been observer several times, and I've seen the way it works. We have tried to play tricks to the system several times ourselves as observers, and the system immediately recognized the trick, and it was not possible to actually trick the system. So where are these actors that they have all their representatives in every single one of the 30,000 polling centers in the whole of Venezuela? Where are they? Why are they produced fake ones? Why have they not submitted them to the investigation? And it is clear, in my view, that they know that they're claiming something totally false. That's why they're running away. God knows where they are. And I think it's going to get worse for them. From the political point of view, I think they're going to get totally discredited. And people like Blinken, people like Milei, I don't want to mention a few others who are also, I know, they dug themselves into a big hole. I think in some cases, not in all of the cases, I want some of them to stay in the hole but I want some others to ensure that we help them to come out of the hole that they got themselves in, because this is getting clearer and clearer. And that's why we can say with total certainty, you know, the CNE have produced all the results which are necessary. By the way, before I finish, in every election in Venezuela, there are 16 audits. And you can only go to audit number 2 once audit number 1 is satisfied. And then you move to number 3, number 4, number 5. And on every single one of them, all the political parties that are participate, are present. They have their international observers, their international expert, and everybody else can actually see this. So there is no possibility, zero possibility. The only fraud that's been committed, perpetrated brutally before our own eyes is the fake website produced by the opposition, by Edmundo González and María Corina Machado, that has almost, I mean, they violated absolutely every principle. They have got no shame in terms of pretending, you know, they think that we're stupid. And of course we're not.
Thank you, Francisco. I would add to that, yes, that, you know, it's important when we talk about the QR codes, because those QR codes, they call them hash codes, contain all the voting information. When you scan them, those codes that are at the bottom of each voting record, they contain all the information of the polling station and the voting at the closing time of that polling station. And it's important to highlight that just 2 days ago, Venezuelan ambassador to the UN, Samuel Moncada, explained to the Venezuelan people that they did a research about some of these codes, and scanning them, they took them to websites of US businesses. So it is evident that those voting records that the opposition is showing in this infamous website are, most of them or many of them, manipulated. Linda, sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And this is question 4. Why do you think the Venezuelan National Electoral Council has not published the results?
That's right.
I don't know, frankly. I don't know. I can only speculate. So all I can say is maybe they don't. Maybe the data was corrupted. I don't know. I'm sorry I can't answer the question. So I think I'll just let others answer it.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Ivan.
Why do I think the National Electoral Council has not published? As I understand, they have up to 30 days to publish. And so I'm going to assume that they have that to allow for an abundance of caution, so that once things are published, you know, checks and balances are in place, things are accurate. The opposition hasn't recognized any of the checks and balances of the entire election, so I'm not sure why they would recognize the National Electoral Council publishing. I think if and when they're published, the opposition will have a very, you know, simplistic accusation that they're just not authentic, that there's photoshopping. They obviously don't respect the government institutions. They claim that all levels of government have been captured by Maduro. And our media is very quick to support these accusations. We have the same arguments in both the US and Canada. Both the right and the left in the US are concerned that the Supreme Court has been captured by the other side. When Obama appoints Supreme Court justices, the right doesn't like it. When Trump appoints, the left doesn't like it. They have the same argument. When Trump goes to court, right-wing media complains that it was an Obama-appointed judge, basically saying that, you know, the courts have been captured by the Democrats. And in Canada, we have arguments that the conservatives in Canada don't like that Trudeau has been appointing senators, and they insinuate that this is basically making the Senate bias. And some on the Liberal side are complaining that Trudeau is appointing independents to the Senate. So the argument, that we're hearing in from the opposition and our mainstream media isn't really just exclusive to Venezuela.
Thank you, Ivan. Arnold.
Yeah, so the question is, Jesus, why do you think the Venezuelan National Electoral Council has not published the results? In order to answer that properly, I think one has to deal with regarding a couple of important facts. Based on my previous study before the visit, and while I was there speaking and exchanging with the electoral officials, it is important to point out, according to the law, that after, when people vote, they have the electronic record as well as a printout. So in all the ballot box, all the polling stations, they have both. However, according to the electoral law, only, I'm using the word only in that sense, only 54% of the voting results is based on an actual comparison between the voting machine and the tally. Why is that? In my view, they never say why, but in my view, the Venezuelans want to avoid a situation that happens in many countries, Latin America and elsewhere, when the results of the elections, it takes a long time to come out, and this can be an occasion to create chaos, regime change, etc. So they have established this law, only 54%. And this, if they find out that this 54% is reliable, that there was no hitch in the voting system, then they declare this as the official result that is irreversible. And that is what they announced very late on July 29th, the night of the elections. Those were the voting results, official voting results. Now, what happened after that, Maduro, extremely clever person, he turned the tables on the opposition, said, okay, let's bring it all to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Venezuela has an electoral law. And what was just published yesterday, what was just published yesterday were the full official results. That is the results over and above the 54% were also tallied together. That is the voting machine and the tally. And it turned out to be right. It is another confirmation that the initial announcement of the Maduro victory was confirmed by this full tally of 100% of the polling stations.
Thank you. Thank you, Arnold. I believe that Alison is not with us anymore because she explained that she is in the
That sounded terrible.
Do you hear me?
Sorry, it's me. When you say Alison is not with us anymore, it sounded terrible.
It sounds funereal. Yes.
Sorry, that was not the intention. But let me add something to what Arnold said, just taking the advantage that, Alison is not connected. It's important to what Arnold said about how the CNE operates, because every step of the voting process is audited, and it's almost impossible to violate the vote itself. And it's important to highlight that this cyber attack that was announced by the CNE the same moment they announced the first results did not affect the quality or the integrity of the vote itself, but the transmission of the votes from the voting centers to the aggregation centers that are spread around the countries and to the headquarters of the CNE. It's important to highlight that because some people might believe that there is a chance for the electoral results to be, changed or something like that, and it is impossible. Another important thing that some people forget is that one of the most important opposition influencers is Luis Vicente León, which is the head of the polling firm Data Analysis. The day after the election, he was interviewed and he said that he believed that the results announced by the CNE were accurate. And how did he explain that? And I believe that is important, what he said. He said, listen, guys, the numbers that the CNE shows that of people that voted for Maduro are consistent with the historical, numbers of Chavista voting in presidential elections. The other thing that he said was the turnout was not as big as the opposition needed to make a change. And another important thing that he said is that the machinery, the electoral machinery of the PSUV worked flawlessly during the election day. So he basically, what he said is that he considered that the results, the numbers were accurate. So I just wanted to add that because a lot of people have forgot about this interview with Luis Vicente León. Now going to the next question, which is, what do you know about the cyber attacks as a tool of U.S. imperialism for regime change? Please, Arnold.
Again, okay, what do you know about cyber attacks as a tool of U.S. imperialism for regime change? Several of our colleagues mentioned today, and there's many articles on that whole issue to confirm that U.S. and their allies did use as cyber attacks. For example, one very important thing that comes to mind that I could have mentioned in the first question, to delay the results of the elections. They had a massive attack on the CNE website. And, at it was so late, I thought, something is wrong. I was concerned because normally they come out, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, but I think we had to wait till 11:30 or midnight for them to come out. And that is the fault, not of the Chavistas, not of the Maduro government, not of the CNE, but by the opposition who purposely carried out a cyber attack to create this aura of what's happening. Why are they not coming out? Exactly is what they had to, what they wanted to do. Now, with regards to cyber attacks, it's the one that is used in elections, just part of an overall policy of U.S. imperialism to destroy the Bolivarian Revolution. Another cyber attack comes to mind that is in 2019, in March 2019, I believe. The U.S. and their allies carried out a major cyber attack against the entire electoral grid of Venezuela. For several days, Jesus, I'm sure you remember that. For several days, people went without electricity. It was a terrible situation. Why did they do that? In order to create a feeling of desperation and have people blame the Maduro government, which, of course, some people did because they did not see how the United States, they do not believe how the United States would actually carry out a cyber attack to make the people suffer so that they rise up against the Maduro government. However, just a short days after that cyber attack, talking about protagonistic democracy,
2 minutes.
Protagonistic democracy, one of my main themes, just several days after that cyber attack, on the occasion of the Venezuelan National Anti-Imperialist Day, on March 19th, 2019, they had a massive demonstration against the cyber attack, pointing out that the guilty party is the United States. Why March 19th, 2019? Because that is the anniversary when Barack Obama declared that Venezuela is a threat, extraordinary threat to the people of Venezuela. And that tradition of opposing imperialism and always, and rightly so, blaming imperialism for all their sabotage that they carry out against whether it's the electoral system, whether electoral grid or the electoral process.
Thank you, Arnold. Ivan.
Thank you. I will probably defer more to the other guests on this one. I don't know much about cyber attacks, and I would really like to learn more about what Arnold was just talking about. Very interesting. I mean, the only one that comes to my mind would, of course, be Stuxnet. And if the West is willing to risk a nuclear accident to basically disrupt their enemy, then, you know, really anything is possible. And of course, cyber attacks are very easy to deny. And that's really all I'll say, but I would like to learn much more about the attacks Arnold was talking about.
Thank you, Ivan. Linda.
Hi, how am I sounding now?
Fine.
Okay, is it better?
A bit,
Okay,
I think.
A bit better.
Okay, I'm still going to yell, sort of. Well, aside from the recent situation in Venezuela, which is clearly, again, an act of war to destroy the election and to overthrow the government, we know that these things occur Russia. When Russia first started the special military operation, none of us could get access to the Russian Federation website to get his speeches or any background from the Russian perspective. That's a common practice. Recently, the cyber attacks were used in the invasion of Kursk, where neither Russian government nor civilians had access to electronic communication, which of course puts the civilians in extreme danger. Aside from that, it's an act of war. The other thing related to it, I think, is the use of terrorist and criminal gangs. And I read an article by a guy named Rivera who said, yeah, the U.S. through the CIA is setting up what they call structured organized crime groups, where they're recruiting disaffected sort of criminal youth to conduct sabotage operations and target the militia. And this we know, of course, was their strategy in Syria. And this guy Rivera argues that that's the plan for Venezuela. If they can get the right kind of government in there, they will give Venezuela the serious treatment, which will be a situation of civil war. I think the people on the left who are attacking Maduro
2 minutes.
And taking the side of the opposition to think about the consequences of the success of these fascists getting into power. U.S. alliance fascists, very much the same as the fascists that were used in the 70s and 80s, and which Chomsky wrote about at length. I guess that's what I have to say about that question.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Francisco.
Yeah, I think Arnold and Linda are short in their assessment of the cyber attack. I think the cyber attack was a central component of a coup d'etat that was going on, organized by the United States. I listened very carefully to an interview by Gabriela Jimenez, the Minister of Science and Technology. And she said that there were at one point 35 million attacks per second, which it is possible with a bot farm. The intention was to actually destroy each one of the firewalls of the CNE. My information was that the CNE had about 15 firewalls. And if you destroy one, then you can destroy the next one and the next one and the next one until you get to the core, and the intention was to destroy. And I don't think the intention was to delay the announcement of the results in order to blame the government. I think the intention was that there was no result announced, in order for the coup d'etat to have a good justification to unleash the wave of violence that actually was unleashed later on, as we know. I think the components are the following. It's a similar coup d'etat attempt but with a new component, which is cyber attack. The key components are a massive, months-long world media campaign, demonizing the government, saying that the government was going to lose, and so on. That was number one. Number two, the second thing was to ensure that there was enormous pressure from the social media, which we'll talk about in a second. And the social media actually supplemented the world corporate media with a huge amount of hatred posts.
2 minutes.
I mean, it was really, really horrific. And then was the cyber attack, plus the wave of violence that was unleashed. Had they succeeded in destroying the CNA digital system that actually, produces the results, I think the situation would have been much, much worse. That was the intention. The intention was to wage a coup d'etat, carry out a coup d'etat, using the inability of the government, who would be blamed for not producing the results. And the intention was to say, well, the government is hiding the results because they lost and they haven't got anything to prove it. Thankfully, the CNE has sufficient protection in order to ensure that the system produced the result. And by 11:30, as Arnold correctly said, the results were produced by 80%, and then later on by 97%, and now we know by 100%. But that was the intention. My worries, if I may extend myself for 10 seconds on this, is the worry I have is this. I think Venezuela will defend itself against a similar one in the future. But the problem is, if there are countries that actually do not have this level of protection, they do not have the level of grassroots organization, they do not have the level of state which Venezuela has, were they be to attack in the same way, I'm not sure they'll be able to defend themselves, and the United States will be able to get away with a coup d'etat easily, in my view. And I'm thinking of 2 or 3 countries which I don't want to mention. But it's quite important to bear that in mind. It was a coup.
Thank you, Francisco. I believe that your point is pretty amazing, important. I mean, stating that the cyber attack was not only an attempt to delay the results, but an attempt to actually destroy the electoral, capabilities of the CNE. So I believe that it's important to highlight that, because some people out there try to diminish, and when someone talks about cyber attacks, they try to mock him or her, like if cyber attacks do not exist, like if the U.S. Army doesn't have a cyber command specialized in cyber attacks. Another important thing is that, talking about cyber attack, is that in this recent speech of Ambassador Moncada, he said that Astra and Anonymous and these, hacker organizations fighting for freedom around the world, between quotations, are just CIA fronts. I mean, and a lot of people know that, and some people have documented those claims. So we know that the U.S. is behind these cyber attacks against the Venezuelan electoral system, and as you said, Francisco, it was part of the plan, to vulnerate elections and then claim fraud. And the last question is, what do you think is the role of social media platforms in the current situation in Venezuela, and how it affected the behavior of opposition followers? Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, they've used this in many other places. I think the idea to launch a campaign of hatred, of horrible innuendos and horrible accusations. Let me give you one example. They accuse Fernando Haddad in Brazil at the time when Lula could not be the candidate because he was in prison. They accuse of him of trying to actually turn the Ministry of Education to teach young students to become gay. And then he was portrayed falsely of course, with a T-shirt with a huge notice here in his chest saying Jesus Christ was gay. Obviously, they wanted to call the evangelical vote. And we know the results. You know, somebody fascistic, idiotic, really horrible, brutish, was able to get 55% of the vote in Brazil, which is supposed to be a quite sophisticated society with a quite a strong, you know, long-standing political party, such as the Workers' Party. The intention is to actually ensure that they fanaticize the opposition so that there is no possibility that they can listen to rational argument. That's the idea. Now, thankfully, and I think there is a great deal of discussion, which I'm not very happy with, about cognitive problems and so on, that this campaign does. I don't believe that. It doesn't mean to say that it doesn't produce some of that on some of the people. But if they were to produce such a result, the cognitive behavior in people to treat them like automatons, you know, the number of people on the 29th of July would have been millions, not a few thousands. And worse, why are you unable to alienate people to the degree that you want, so that when you unleash a wave of violence, you need to pay them $40, $100, $150, and then they repent, you know, very quickly. So the key component politically seems to me is to ensure that significant sections of society cannot and are unwilling to listen to rational argument putting forward by, in this case, President Maduro, the PSUV, in the case of Brazil, the Workers' Party, Lula, Fernando Haddad, and in other places it's the same. It is a definitely intoxicating campaign, which is deliberately done in order to ensure that there is this enormous polarization, produces this impossibility of the government actually increasing its message, and that's the purpose of it. So you have the international media, you know, with this overall arch messaging, which is very homogeneous in this particular case, led by the United States, the State Department, National Endowment for Democracy, and so on. And then you have this media, social media, which is horrific, really horrific. And I know this was reported by Gabriela Jimenez. You know, people were being intoxicated with thousands and thousands of messages, literally by the minute. And if you are subjected to that level of you know, intoxicating messaging, day in, day out, 24/7 on your phone, which is they get you, then you can imagine that this has some consequences. And it seems to me that we need to think about what to do regarding this, and government needs to think about this, about what to do. Not that I have the answers, but I know what the problem is. And I think that's the role that it has. And in the case of Venezuela, on the July 29th, this was also a central component of the coup attempt.
Thank you, Francisco. Linda.
Yeah, I agree with Jill in the fact that social media is geared to prevent people from knowing the truth. It's a sort of chaotic thought environment. And again, as Francisco said, it's a way to get people to emote instead of to think about what's actually happening, what might be wrong with the various posts, what, you know, sort of engaging with them critically. People just, you know, like and pass it on. Then there's, you know, what I noticed, and I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I generally don't like social media, to be honest. I looked on TikTok, and what I noticed on TikTok is pretty good on Gaza, right? It's not good on Venezuela. It's very, very difficult to find anybody but Maria Mercado speaking and talking. There was a reproduction of these 6 phony polls, and very little that was positive. You really had to look to find anything on TikTok to be positive towards the Maduro government, especially before the election observers, who are also journalists, started getting on TikTok. One of the things I saw that was particularly bizarre was this photo of Diosdado Caballo dead. Diosdado Caballo is dead, and they had this sort of death mask picture of him. And it came up several times in my search, and I knew he wasn't dead. And so this is, I took this as a threat to him. Is this an announcement that they're going to try to kill him? What is this? It's just bizarre. And I don't know how to explain it, because I think it was kind of just that it's very nasty, kind of, as Francisco said, this is a case of a kind of hate that, oh, you know, he's dead, isn't that great?
Thank you,
And
Linda.
that's all I
Sorry,
can say.
sorry, go ahead. I saw you ended.
I can say, no. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Ivan, please.
Yeah, the social media, one of the things about social media is that messages can be spread very quickly. They don't really have to be vetted. So like early on, there were a lot of videos. There was videos of people supposedly stealing ballot boxes. And this video was widely shared. I think Musk actually also retweeted this video of people running into polling stations and running out with ballot boxes, when really, if you looked carefully at all, they were air conditioning units. I'm sure everybody saw these videos. The fact that this was spread so widely shows shows what social media can do. Anyone can share it. And of course, people see these images, that gets implanted in their brain. Do they actually see any of the corrections? It doesn't matter. It's part of the messaging. There are a lot of videos of people trying to get in to vote with security barring the gates and the doors. And if you look at the videos, a lot of them, they're taken at night. Sunsets in Venezuela, in Caracas, close to 7 o'clock. Polling stations are closed at 6. If the video is dark, it means people are trying to get in, violently trying to get in to vote after the polling station has been closed for close to an hour. So, things can be spread quickly. They don't need to be vetted. And I think it's a very effective way to spread misinformation. And talking to Canadians, average Canadians, friends that know I went to Venezuela, yeah, it's very effective. People are absorbing this message. People here in Canada, the average person is unaware that our government is supporting the far right. They're unaware that Maduro has any support whatsoever. They're unaware of the history of Western intervention. So obviously that message is infecting people's brains very quickly and easily. And it seems to be a very effective way to spread misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Arnold.
Yes, thank you very much. Before dealing with the issue of social media, I'd like to just mention that what Francisco, his remark regarding the real nature of the cyber attack around the elections, he's right. I mean, what we saw was a delay, but that does not mean that was the objective. It was not limited to that. They definitely had the objective to destroy the entire electoral system and create chaos as a basis for a coup d'etat regime change in Venezuela. Regarding social media, I'm not an expert. I just like to mention there are different types. Social media is important. I had the opportunity to participate in an important radio program just before the elections in Caracas around July 26th or 27th by Diosdado, Lamasdado. He's really good at that. The Venezuelans are great on communications. What he showed there, amongst other things, for everyone to see on television as well as us in the audience, the photographs or the photographs of the so-called Machado crowds before the elections in support of the opposition. So you have these zoomed in shots by them, but the Venezuelans, for all of the zoom shots, they also have drone shots of the so-called crowds to put it in the perspective, indicating that their crowds are extremely small. So Venezuela, sure, they're up against a very formidable enemy with regards to social media, but they're able to counter it. I also like to just say one thing before closing on that, and that is there are different types of social media. You have, of course, the obvious ones at Twitter, which is, for example, used by Machado to give the impression that they have a great crowds and all that, and retweeted by Elon Musk, etc. And you have, Facebook, Meta. We know who the owner of that is. But on the other hand, you also have Telegram, who's more open-minded to our type of thinking, and whose owner was just arrested a couple of days ago, and he's facing a jail sentence. So that's a very, fishy issue. Why he has been detained? Why is he being prevented, perhaps, from continuing his Telegram activity, which is an important outlet for those who are a victim of persecution. At the same time, I'd also like to mention that Maduro made a very clever suggestion when he went after WhatsApp. He said, instead of WhatsApp, go to WeChat. What is WeChat? WeChat is organized by China, the People's Republic of China, and has billions and billions of followers, almost as much as Twitter or Facebook. And I noticed that I have a WeChat account. Many people from Venezuela joined within seconds of Maduro making this announcement. So Venezuela is up against a very difficult situation, but they have a lot of experience and they're able to counter it as best as they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. I agree with you with that. I mean, we have been learning to deal with social media and mainstream media bias since 2002. But I wanted to add to what we have been talking, that now that we are in this moment on dealing with the social media effects, I believe that this elect Maria Corina Machado leadership with importations is something that was real artificially in mainstream media. I mean, Maria Corina Machado has a lot of supporters, especially the more violent and far-right opposition Venezuelans. But then it was that leadership was inflated in social media after she allegedly won the last year opposition primaries. So I wanted to highlight that because that's how they use social media to, change people's perceptions on certain issues. The same thing happened with this call for some people in the north about human rights violations and massive arrests in Venezuela. And that's also something that has been spread on social media. And it's not true. I mean, we had 2 days of violence in Venezuela after the elections, and after that, everything went back to normal. But if you check Venezuela on social media, you will notice that there are some people trying to present that the situation is chaos here in Venezuela, which is an absolute lie. For example, I hear people on social media saying that the police was going into people's phone. The people went to the street, and that the police seize their phones to check if they publish something against the government to arrest them. Things like that you can hear in social media, and it has been spread on social media, and that's terrible. What else? Another important thing that is not related to this, but I hear in some left or extreme left forums, is that Maria Corina Machado constructed a broad coalition of forces around her. And that's not true. I mean, she was supported by the traditional far-right parties, and besides her subrogate candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, there were 8 more opposition candidates, and that's an evidence that she didn't have a broad coalition behind her. So thank you, my friends, for your answers. I believe that we now have to go to the question and answer sessions. But before that, I also want to highlight that the Venezuelan Solidarity Network is organizing another webinar this August the 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And the name of the webinar is Hands of Venezuela, Eyewitness Report from the Venezuelan Presidential Election. And there's going to be Roger Harris, Camila Escalante, William Camacaro, Alison Bodin, and Andreina Chavez from Venezuela Analysis. So I invite you to join them this in a couple of days on August 27th. So let's go to the questions and answers, and I have like a list of questions that people has been writing in the chat, and we also want to let anyone know that if you write those questions in the chat, we will try to answer them, but we already have several of them, so we want to try to make these things fast. The first question is, it was for Alison, but she's not with us anymore. What was the response on the ground or to the Supreme Court announcement that Maduro won the elections? Anyone wants to answer that? I can answer it, but I want you to do it first. I believe that is me because I'm the one here in Venezuela. Nothing happened. I mean, there were no protests of the massive opposition people protesting that decision of the Supreme Court. Everything evolved normally in Caracas when the Supreme Court ratified the victory of President Maduro. I don't know if any one of you want to add something to that.
Just very briefly,
Go ahead.
the international media, well, I haven't read everything, but I think the homogeneity of the message is so intense. I assume that all of them said the same thing. The message of the international media was something like this: Maduro is confirmed amid controversy, which is not quite the same as saying Maduro has committed fraud and the Supreme Court just backed that up, which is quite different in terms of, the subtlety of it is quite clear. I think it's got to do with Blinken backtracking. They know they cannot sustain the position. So they tried to make out that there were, huge number of people internationally everywhere. We couldn't see any pictures of the demonstrations anywhere. And the one in Caracas was quite small. Some of the people who were present present there, I wasn't there, reported that, it couldn't fill 2 blocks. I mean, that was the size of it. So in other words, I think this is quite important to understand for us anyway, and our solidarity movement. One thing is there is discontent and people can be very frightened, especially it seems to me that the key message of the world corporate media, which was a component of the whole thing, was if you elect Maduro again, then the exodus this time around is going to be gigantic. And some of them were actually even quoting some polls saying that 40% of the population was going to leave the country. That is 12 million people. Now, I think that has a tremendous impact. And the reason is, people from the first exodus, millions of people actually suffered enormously. Their sons, their daughters, their husbands, their wives, they lost them. They went somewhere else. They were treated terribly badly. They lost their property. They sold their houses. They sold their businesses. I mean, they were encouraged to do this. And therefore, it was very painful for them, for many of them. So to be reminded of the possibility of going through that pain again in larger scale was definitely quite important. I'll finish with this. So despite that, I think accounts for the 44%. But the total amount of people who went on the demonstrations on the 17th of August, and when the Supreme Court also informed of the results, is an indication that 44% may be discontent about many other things, but they're not prepared to engage in subversive violent activity. That's a very small minority, and that's clear from the demonstrations of Maria Corina.
Thank you, Francisco. And this is more than a comment. It's more a comment than a question, but let me read it. Regarding the violent attacks on the police, is the Venezuelan right aware that in a neoliberal country, Italy, for example, those protesters would have been shot? That's absolutely true. I mean, you have to look at the demonstration against the National Democratic Convention in Chicago, and you see how the protesters are like caged and surrounded by police all the time. And if you see that in Venezuela, you will die. And not you. I mean, mainstream media will make a big fuss. But anyone want to comment on this comment?
I just say a phrase which is
Go ahead.
total double standards, absolutely double standards. Remember the yellow vests in France. You remember the level of brutality. You remember the social explosion in Chile, and you remember the level of brutality. Where were all of these bandits, all of these commentary, all of these horror about, the systematic daily violation of human rights, where the police was instructed to actually fire rubber bullets to people's faces, and they blinded so many of them, not only in Chile, they copied that from civilized France, where it was practiced in the first place. And if you were to look at any demonstrations anywhere in Europe, certainly, the brutality of the repression is horrific, but only Venezuela counts when it comes to, the repression is quite frankly, the containment of the opposition in Venezuela is very mild compared to what I'm experienced myself in the past in my own country and in other places.
That's true. Someone else? I just wanted to add that something that has been also spreading in a lot of leftist forums, which is that those violent protests in Venezuela happen in low income, working class neighborhoods in Venezuela. And that is an evidence that Chavismo is weakened and it is about to collapse. And I have to tell you that at least from my personal experience during those days, what I saw is that in those violent protests in working class neighborhood in Caracas, you didn't see actually people protesting there, normal people protesting there. You saw people with all the characteristic of criminal gang members. And it's important to highlight that because it is evident that it was an orchestrated effort and a strategy, something planned to feed this narrative and to show, especially abroad, that the barrios, as we call them, are not supporting Chavismo anymore. I'm not saying that there should be a lot of people in the barrios that might be mad at the government because they blame it for the economic distress that we are facing, but they are not the majority, if you ask me. So anyway, I'm going to jump to the next question that
Jesus,
says, go ahead.
Just one point, if I may.
Go ahead.
If the Maduro government is on the verge of collapsing or collapse, how come the most powerful country in the world, U.S. imperialism, in the mouth of Blinken, did not say he would recognize the opposition candidate? And the day after, in another press conference by the same State Department, 2 journalists from Miami, I believe, complained to the State Department, hey, what's going on? How come Blinken backtracked and does not recognize the opposition leader as the new president of Venezuela? So the Maduro government, far from collapse, they came out victorious once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's true. That's true. The U.S. diplomacy has been zigzagging on this issue. The next question is, please talk about the extent of control the opposition had in the media inside Venezuela leading up to the election. Anyone? But I can answer that question, but I don't want to kidnap the answers. Let me tell you what I think about this question. Basically, media has been losing in Venezuela, and I believe that as in all over the world, the share they had about spreading information and has been replaced by social media platforms. And that's the reality in Venezuela, and I believe that that's the reality mostly everywhere. But in that sense, having the support of the U.S. apparatus, Maria Corina Machado, the opposition people had a lot of support from social media platforms. In terms of traditional, media in Venezuela, like radio and TV or newspapers, I would say like something around 75% belong to opposition people and usually produce information aligned with their narrative, and they has been supporting Maria Corina Machado ever since. But right now the battle is not there. If you ask me, the battle is in social media platforms, and they are absolutely in those platforms. Absolutely, the opposition people have a majority, have the favor of the platforms. They are not banned. They are not shadow banned. They are not affected by the things that we in the left are usually affected by. Using these social media platforms. I don't know if someone want to add something to that.
Just very briefly, I'm curious about the following. What I've noticed is this. The media that was so extreme in the past, Venevisión, Globovisión, they're really extreme. I mean, literally every single day, they were saying horrible things about whatever the government was doing or was not doing. I think that's changed quite dramatically. The mainstream media in Venezuela, they might be opposition and they're definitely right-wing, but there is no viscerality in their messaging, in their discussion, and they're split. There are some who actually favor some kind of modus vivendi and see what they can do in the future, and there are some who are saying, we need to change this government, but none of them, as in the past, suggest that there is the need to actually use violence or regime change using the United States. So it seems to me that is change. And part and parcel of that is also the transformation that some key institutions have actually undergone in Venezuela. For example, Fede Cámaras before was the most terrible enemy and wanted to overthrow the government literally every single day. Today, the Fede Cámaras is entirely different, opposes sanctions, is prepared to engage in collaboration with the government. So it seems to me that the government of Venezuela has been able to reshape significantly the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, but also even the sections of the bourgeoisie, so that actually there is conviviality and there is peace in the country in order for that stability to produce economic development. And you can see the economic development that is taking place. And I think, therefore, the extremists have to go for something which is illegal, which is secret, which is underhand, hence the social media.
That's true. That's true. Let me read the next one. What about it's a comment. I believe that we answered it, but I want to read it anyway. What about the electronic hacking of the electoral system? Some sites says it receives some 30 million attacks per minute. This wasn't an individual, but another nation. Who can guess who? Any evidence of influence of CIA, NED, other OCs? So we already talked about this thing. I believe that the question was raised before we reached the conversation about cyber attacks, but I'm not sure if someone wants to add something to that. If no one wants,
I think Francisco dealt very well with it. People
yes,
on the replay.
That's true. That's true. The next question is, what you all think about the response from the president of Brazil and Colombia on the Venezuelan presidential results? And as far as these comments made by both of these governments, does Maduro government still has good relations with the Lula and Petro government?
Can I have a go?
Yes.
Sorry to jump on every single one of them because I'm so fascinated by Venezuela.
Go ahead.
What you had was three left-wing governments, Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico, that somehow came together in a sort of, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to use it, troika. where they said, well, we want to see, the beef. We want to see the actual thing before we actually recognize. And then these began to get worse in terms of statement from President Lula and some also from President Petro. But López Obrador, AMLO, was being more circumspect. And then I realized what was going on when López Obrador decided to leave the Troika and then decided to abandon it. And then there was only 2 out of 3. Now, there have been explanations. I don't have all the answers to this, but there have been some explanations which are very facile in my view, and they're wrong. To suggest that, Lula and Petro are actually under the command or influence, or they've been bought off by US imperialism is completely wrong. I don't think that's the case. My sense is that they are under pressure from their own electoral coalitions, which are very broad. I mean, the case of Colombia is so broad that sometimes makes you uncomfortable. In the case of Brazil, it became also very, very broad, which was necessary in order to win the election. But which is, in order to maintain it, I imagine the pressure is coming from the most moderate part of that coalition. I'm using the word moderate, to be careful, to be diplomatic, to put pressure on this government to actually make the statements like that. It's a clear indication that there are internal difficulties and internal pressures, mainly domestic. Now that everything is being sorted, let me put it that way, in terms of the Supreme Court and the investigation and the information, what else are they going to do? My sense here is that very likely there's going to be some high-level discrete meetings between President Maduro, Ivan Gil, or others with the equivalent in Brazil and Colombia, and they will sort of come out with something which is reasonable, and then they will take it from there, as it were, to work out, what needs to be done in the future. Therefore, I think the idea that some people supposedly on the left are being put forward, the left actually is divided, even the left condemns the thing, is completely wrong, and they're going to realize that they jumped the gun too quickly. So I'm quite hopeful that that's the case. And one final point on this, which I think is very important: we should not attack Petro and Lula as enemies of class, as class enemies. They are not. They're on our side. Maybe they're under difficult pressure. The robustness of the Venezuelan revolution is a guarantee that they can be sort of put on the correct line very soon as a result of compromise, conversation, negotiation. Well, not negotiation, conversations and sorting things out, the clarifications and so on, which I think they're going to come. In other words, if somebody dug themselves into a big hole, we should help them. I think the government of Venezuela is going to help them to dig themselves out of that by opening their arms and embrace them as as they have done, as brothers that they are, brothers in the struggles as they are.
That's a good point. That's a good point,
May I
Francisco.
jump in? One
Yes,
point?
of course,
I
Arnold.
think
Go ahead.
Francisco is right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Francisco and others, but in the past, before the elections, Lula as well as Duque have made some negative remarks regarding the Bolivarian Revolution and President Maduro. But I think the main point is they are in a difficult situation. And Venezuela, who has a long history of diplomacy, how to deal with complicated situations, not only with other states, but with other governments, other parties, that they are working on a modus, on a way to work out this situation. They are definitely not the enemy of the Bolivarian Revolution. If you want to know what an enemy of the Bolivarian Revolution is, from amongst the so-called left, in comparison to Brazil and Colombia, look at Chile. Boris, there is a good example of someone who's completely sold out. And one has to mention the leadership of the Communist Party of Chile, which is working hand in glove with Boris. They completely sold out. I saw a video yesterday of Boris was trying to have sort of sitting in a cafe or whatever in a street in Santiago de Chile. You saw that? And he was attacked by the citizens there, and rightly so, you know. So there's a big difference between Boris on the one hand, on the other hand, the leadership of Brazil and Colombia, and I'm sure that they will come through at an opportune time to take a correct stand in collaboration with President Maduro.
Thank you, Arnold. Thank you. I would add to that actually Mexico President AMLO make a statement after the Supreme Court announced confirmed the electoral results. And as far as I remember, basically what he says is that he applauded the ruling of the Supreme Court and that he was expecting the publishing of the results. It's important to highlight that in the ruling of the Supreme Court, the CNE was instructed to publish as soon as possible the results of the I believe that they are talking about the full results of the election, and I hope that will happen this week, that is starting tomorrow. And also I have to say that Brazil and Colombia yesterday issued a statement. I mean, Lula and Petro, but I haven't read it yet, so I'm not sure what they actually say. But I believe, as far as I remember from the comments on social media, that they were trying to be less apprehensive, and they also called for, invited the CNE to publish the detailed results of the elections. Here's another comment. It says, how do we get around the mainstream narrative? Yeah, I would say that read alternative and independent news outlet like Orinoco Tribune, for example. but also, try to reach webinars like the one that we are organizing. Follow the people in the National Manifesto group. Read websites like Venezuela Analysis, and many other alternative news outlets are there that make a difference. I don't know if someone wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, also, read Orinoco Tribune every day, definitely. I want to add the following to this point that you're making, Jesus. The question is, what is the key axis on which you're going to organize the defense of Venezuela? And it seems to me that that's quite important, because there is lack of homogeneity in terms of, the solidarity movement outside Venezuela. You have all sorts of positions, which are, many of them are very good, but they're not quite in the right framework, in my view. The crucial question with regard to the defense of Venezuela and reading alternative media and informing yourself about every detail and so on, is the question of national sovereignty. And also the right to self-determination. In other words, you want to ask people that they should defend the right of Venezuela not to be under attack, to engage in their own pathway, because it's their sacrosanct right to determine their own future, even if you don't agree with everything they do. But you should disagree with a bully such as the United States, organizing aggression, organizing coup d'etat, assassinating people, imposing sanctions that led to the death of thousands of people. This is what the key is, it seems to me. And that, I think, there is no homogeneity in terms of that. So you can organize a very nice platform, and you can organize your own messaging, your own discourse around this crucial question. You should champion all the social progress and the democracy in Venezuela. But this is absolutely the central question. And sometimes people are too enamored with Bolivarian socialism, and they make the issue of Bolivarian socialism the crucial issue. I don't think it is. Imagine, just to belabor the point, imagine if Hugo Chavez, instead of making Bolivar the emblem of what he was going to do, he then made Lenin the central question. I don't think he would have succeeded. So that's a sort of similar, example that we need to actually learn, particularly outside, certainly in the imperialist citadels in Canada and the United States and here in Europe.
Thank you, Francisco. We already reached the 2 hours mark for the webinar, but we still have 4 more questions that I'm going to try to read fast and ask the Compass to answer if they want fast. And the next one is, will the U.S. install another Guaido, or has Venezuela stopped such actions altogether? Basically, what I understand from the question is that that if the person that asked the question want to know if the coup d'etat has been stopped already. And I go back again to what Ambassador Moncada said a few days back, which is that he believed that we are in an ongoing coup d'etat that is going to last until January next year.
Mhm.
Because that's the idea, to create chaos, and the whole fraud and election participation of the opposition was just a front for what the real intentions are, which is that to promote a coup d'etat that I'm pretty sure that they're gonna succeed, but they are gonna try. What do you think about that, Compass?
Great.
Arno,
me too.
Linda.
I agree as well. Yeah.
Yes, yes. There's another one. Since this is a continuous onslaught from U.S. imperialist regime, which has been targeting progressive countries around Latin America, is there any united front by Bolivia, Cuba, and other solidarity with the people of Venezuela? Arnold, you know about that.
No.
Arnold will know.
Can you repeat that question again? Sorry, I was
Since
watching the chat.
Don't worry, since this is the continuous onslaught from U.S. imperialist regime, which has been targeting progressive countries across Latin America, is there any united front to face these attacks?
Well, I think there is the basis for it, and one is the ALBA. The ALBA countries are very solid. They might not have most in terms of population, or there are not that many countries. But what is important is that they are politically and ideologically sound against U.S. imperialism. From my view, that is the cutting line today. Where do you stand on U.S. imperialism, whether it's on Venezuela or Palestine? And the ALBA countries are clear on the issue of Venezuela. That is a definite base. While on the other hand, the OAS, the Organization of American States, met recently, and they did not get a large number of countries to buy into their Guaido 2.0 program. So I think it's a very good question. I think it's in the process of developing. You have CELAC, of course, which includes all of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, our dream, I think everyone here, our dream is to have CELAC one day, maybe not in our lifetime, but another lifetime, replace the OAS. It is the only solution. CELAC has to replace the OAS, which is based in Washington, D.C., and has nothing at all to do with our America. That is even including Canada. Thank you.
I agree with you, Arnold. Francisco. Briefly.
Yeah, I mean, there is the Sao Paulo Forum.
Yes, right.
And there is the Puebla Group, and there is the ALBA TCP that, Arnold mentioned. The Sao Paulo Forum is made up of parties which are mass parties. The Workers' Party of Brazil has 3 million members, and it commands something like 54 million votes. And there are several others like that. So these are very big forces. And if you move to Africa, there's plenty of Africans, particularly now in the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. They're just, very enthusiastic with the Bolivarian Revolution, and they also command significant support. There is South Africa, and there is China. So in terms of, support internationally, these are objectively united fronts. We should not operate politically, but definitely are help when it's needed. So it seems to me that Venezuela, in that sense, is well linked to key institutions, organizations, political parties, and multilateral bodies in the world.
Thank you, Compass. Thank you. I'm going to read the next one. Is the CNE deferring the publication of results for the Supreme Court while the opposition is publishing. I don't understand the question, but I believe that they are asking why the CNE is delaying the publication of results while the opposition is publishing the results. It's important to highlight that the opposition is not publishing the results. They are publishing some elect voting records between quotations that many people have proved that are very fraudulent or have a lot of flaws at least. So I believe that is important to say that. I also believe that it's important to mention that I agree with many people that Venezuelans, not only right-wingers, need to see the results in detail as we are accustomed to. But I understand that the results were delayed first by the cyber attack and then by the judicial process that was open when President Maduro filed these resource in the Supreme Court to protect the elections. So now that the Supreme Court issued its ruling and it called the CNE to publish the detailed results, I'm pretty sure that this week those results have to be published. So I don't know if someone wants to add something to that.
Yeah, the elections were contested in Brazil by Bolsonaro, and it took 4 months. The elections were contested in Guatemala, and it took nearly 4 months. The elections were contested in Peru, and it took several months, for the electoral authority to actually recognize that Castillo had won, and so on. So why people use double standards, including ourselves sometimes? Why we use double standards? Venezuela has a very strong institutionality, and that institutionality is being put to work precisely because there were these complexities and these complications as a result of the behavior and the attitude of the extreme right wing. So it's gone through this process. This process is nearly done, and the CNE, I've read the result, the verdict of the electoral room, I think it's called Sala Electoral of the Supreme Court. They absolutely clear. They said you have to produce the result, and there is a sort of constitutional period. Therefore, in Venezuela, it's going to be much shorter than in all the other cases where there have been controversy.
Thank you. Thank you, Francisco. The last question is this one. Should the cyber attack situation not press all nations forward with coordinating election security against the U.S.? That's a good question. I mean, that's a good comment, but I believe that it's going to be hard to implement something like a united international front against U.S. cyber attacks, but that's the desirable thing. I don't know if someone wants to add to that.
No, I agree with you. Sorry to jump in. I agree with you that it's going to be difficult too. But a country like Venezuela can actually get the expertise of other countries that already have much more developed systems. I'm thinking of a few. If they haven't requested already, I'm sure they have. They already are in place. So these plus the specific council against, for cybernetic things that have been set up by President Maduro. This is going to be the mechanism that is going to receive this expertise. But the expertise must come with technology. So I suppose once that collaboration begins, then the technology will follow. And therefore, Venezuela is going to be blindada, quite armored in order to sustain any possible attacks in the future. I think that's going to happen.
No,
Yes,
just to be
yes. Go ahead.
optimistic, or hopefully not overly optimistic. We're all aware that it's a very important development of a multipolar world against U.S. hegemony. And this multipolar world includes countries such as China and Iran, which has a very long history of civilization, technical know-how, and intelligence. All of these countries together who are now developing this multipolar world, who knows, perhaps later on, out of this, there will come also the possibility of a joint effort to oppose cyber attacks, cyberbullying, led in the main by the most important bully of the world today, U.S. imperialism.
That's true, Arnold. I just would add to that that President Maduro, just a few hours after the election, informed that he was calling China and Russia to bring experts to study the cyber attack.
Well,
In a
there you
couple
go.
of days
That's
after
great.
the election, he announced the creation of the Cybersecurity Council, which is another important decision. Go
Those
ahead.
are important points. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. So I believe that we have covered in a very comprehensive way many of the issues that has been raised after the elections. I hope that you enjoyed this webinar, that we designed it in a different way in order to try to make it a little bit more dynamic. And I want to thank again the International Manifesto Group for its support. I'm gonna ask any of you to visit them to check their amazing YouTube video playlist, and also to support them, as well as I will ask you to support the work that we in Orinoco Tribune try to do every day to present you alternative information about Venezuela. So I'm very grateful that even after 15 minutes of our deadline, we still have 63 people watching the webinar. And thank you very much to the panelists for your time and for your knowledge. And un abrazo to everyone. See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank
Un
you.
abrazo,
Thank you.
compas.
Nice to see you, Arnold.
Good to see you, Francisco.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Okay. This will end the meeting for all. I'm going to end the meeting for all.